Hello, everyone. So my name is Katie Quinn, and we are going to be re-envisioning what the recipe is. They are certainly not dead, but they are going through fundamental changes as technology is being brought more and more into the kitchen and in new and different ways. So I am a video content creator, I'm a YouTuber, I'm also a cookbook author, so I have my toe in all of these different aspects, and I'm so excited to be talking to everyone up on the stage because we all come from very different places. So let's go down the line a little bit, and if you could say who you are, what you do, let's start there. John, you want to take it away?
Sure. So my name is Jon Jenkins. Everyone calls me JJ, so if you see me out there, just call me JJ. I'm mostly a technology guy, so I spent most of my career working at places like IBM. I was at Amazon for about 10 years, worked at Pinterest for several years down in the Bay Area, and then started working on cooking technology as part of Hestan Smart Cooking. And what we build is we build a guided cooking system that consists of temperature sensing cookware, a smart heat source, and then apps that contain sort of next generation recipes that set the temperatures and times for you automatically and guide you through the process.
Hi everyone, my name is Kishan. I'm founder and CEO of dishq, or dishq. We're based in Bangalore, and our core technology is essentially taste prediction, and we use food science and machine learning to power that technology. We have a number of different applications of the technology, including a personalized recommendation engine. Before this venture, I used to work at Just Eat.
Hi, I'm Lulu. I've been writing recipes for 25 years now, so that's really what I do as part of my job, whether they're for print, for the website, for hack videos, for any kind of platform imaginable. And I work on what's called our content hub at Good Food, and we basically create content for all the different platforms that, as a media company, we publish.
So I love this because we have such a range of people here, and so you know, when you realize that your grandma, your Italian grandma, it brings out her iPad to search for a recipe, you know that recipes are changing. So let's dig into how. So we've got a B2C company, business to consumer, B2B, and a content creator up here. Start thinking of questions you want to ask because I'm already excited to throw this little guy around. So let's start with fundamentally recipes solve two issues or answer two questions, and that is, what is it? What should I cook? And then the second thing is it any good? Because a lot of search engines might not bring up the best recipes. So how is technology solving those two problems?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll start. I think it's interesting to consider, like, what is the purpose of a recipe? Right? Like a recipe, like, I don't know, when you look at directions to get to some place, right? Like it's like a set of streets you should go to and you end up at a known point. Like a recipe is kind of the same thing. Like it is a set of instructions that should enable you to create the thing that someone else created. Like they're effectively trying to teach you through instructions. And so like the successfulness of any given recipe format or system or whatever should hinge on how well it actually lets you do that. And that's what our goal is. Like our goal is, like, ideally the thing comes out the way the creator of the recipe intended it to. And so, I don't know, that's what I think the future of recipes will be. I think that's what we've been sort of on this long journey striving to get to some degree, right? Like recipes have gotten better and better. We moved from cookbooks to things that have lots of pictures now, so you can see intermediate steps on big blog posts that go on for pages and pages. But I think that's sort of the evolution that's going on right now, more precision.
I fundamentally disagree. You can look at recipes like that. You can look at them as a set of instructions, a bit like building an IKEA bookshelf or something. But actually, where you serve your recipe up changes the nature of what a recipe is. So if you go back, 100 years and you find an old cookbook, someone might have written in the margin, they've changed the recipe to the way they want to do it. Maybe they've left notes for someone else. You delve forward to, if you go onto any, one of the best recipes on the Good Food website, the ones that are used all the time, there are pages and pages of comments underneath. And they're not because the recipe doesn't work, they're because people are having conversations with each other about how to make that recipe better. Or maybe they don't like the red peppers, they'd rather put, butternut squash in something. So one of my sort of concerns, in a way, about what's happening to recipes via technology, and actually, we have to do a lot of work with rewriting recipes for different platforms, is that loss of actual interaction with the user. So I've been heartened to talking to various people here about the fact that people will be able to personalize their recipes through various bits of tech. I know yours does that. So it's one of those things that a recipe isn't just a set of instructions. It can be lots of different things to lots of different people, and we should not lose sight of that, because for some people it's just a jumping off point for something really exciting, and frankly, half the time they end up with a recipe which is nothing like the one that started. It's then their recipe. It's not our recipe anymore.
I think that this brings up a really good point, or question rather, which is, what is it to personalize a meal? Kishan, do you want to take it, as that is what dishq is all about?
Sure. So I think these are really both interesting perspectives, and I think just adding on to what was just said is that, if you just take one of the most common dishes out there, chicken tikka masala, right? There's a million ways you can cook that, and personalization is about understanding what are the propensities for certain people's and affinities for people's different ingredients in that recipe, and bringing out those cooking styles that they're familiar with. Chef skill has a really important role to play in understanding that. So it's about a deep understanding of who's cooking and the situational context in which they're cooking, and then unearthing the version of the recipe that is, whether it's community built or coming out of a cookbook. I think that is the most important thing. It's that matching of understanding people and understanding what they want to achieve with the recipe itself. So yeah.
I mean, I think maybe the fundamental difference about what we're talking about, and this is really an interesting topic to consider, I think, is, was the recipe created to convey something that the recipe creator wanted to convey? Or is it merely a sketch designed for an end user to improvise upon? And I don't know that there's necessarily a right or wrong answer to that. I think we come from more the perspective of someone really wanted to help you do something cool and allow you to make something. In not that it's wrong for you to improvise, but that the success of the recipe in and of itself would be its ability to achieve that end. If you want to go off track and do different things, awesome, more power to you. But if it turns out bad, that's not the recipe fault, the recipe writer's fault. That's on you now, right?
I think quite a lot of people assume that if a recipe goes wrong, it's them. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. I mean, people play around with recipes in the most extraordinary ways. But I suppose also there are different users, and there are a lot of people who just want to be able to put dinner on the table, and they want it to look how they want to look. And we have come through a culture in which there are many, many glossy photographs, whether it be in recipe books or on Instagram, and actually replicating what you're being shown it's not necessarily easy, particularly if someone's fiddled around with the pictures a bit. And I think Instagram's got a lot to answer for. And sometimes I look at a picture of food and it just looks amazing, and I look more closely and I think, you know what? That's a disgusting idea. It looks great. Oh God, someone put cereal in an empty avocado shell yesterday. I was just like, why?
I think the interesting thing there is, if you just take another context, so we're talking about obviously mostly the home cooking scenario, but if you take that into the restaurant for a second and just think about how you behave in a restaurant, and if you try a dish and it isn't to your liking, do you blame the chef? Most often you do, right? And so therefore are you blaming their ability, their skill, the recipe, the ingredients? What are you doing? But when it comes to our home scenario, we don't go through that same process. I mean, in my personal example, if my wife cooks keto cupcakes or something, I know it's something out of her comfort zone or something like that. Whereas if it's her day-to-day thing and it didn't quite go as it does normally, there's a taste consistency issue. So I think it's really about understanding that context, again, going back to that. But I think we're in different modes in terms of how we assess taste and flavor when we're digesting in which scenario, depending on which scenario we're in.
I want to talk about the relationship between personalization and convenience, and what you think, is it more convenient to have a personalized recipe?
It's an interesting question. So I spent part of my career at Amazon working on personalizing the homepage so you'll buy lots of stuff. So I don't think they're fundamentally at odds. I don't think if you were to create a continuum, personalization is on one end and convenience is on the other, right? I don't think those are necessarily opposed. And so I think there's a a valid area for personalization, and go read the comments on allrecipes.com, right? People are like, this is too spicy, this is not spicy enough, this is too salty, I wish this had more butter, I wish it had less butter, right? Like, so clearly people want to personalize. And so, yeah, I guess I just don't believe they're fundamentally in opposition, I guess.
I think it's similar kind of feelings about that. I think personalization comes, it's just, we all talk about it now as something that's being important, but actually it's been happening all the time, and users just doing it on their own, essentially, and we're just trying to latch onto that and make it more convenient for them as a result. Personalization is an enabler towards convenience, I feel, as opposed to something against it. But again, because of the complexities of everybody's taste preferences, I think unearthing the right thing for the right person at the right point in time is where technology can really help. I think that's the key. We haven't got there yet, but because of the various factors, be it biological, ethnicity, psychological, there are so many factors that go into making up and understanding someone's flavor and taste, and presenting them with the right thing. But ultimately, the end game is convenience, but with personalization at the center of it.
I think the other thing is also that what your type of technologies can do is actually break people out of the box they're stuck in. A lot of people cook the same thing over and over again because they're comfortable with it. So actually, if you buy an appliance which offers you an easy way to try something new, that's a great thing. We ran a thing called Take It to 10 because people actually, they have 8 to 10 recipes max, go round and round and round. So actually, one of the things I do think that the new technologies can do is educate and teach. And I think actually, you can't necessarily afford or have the time to go to cooking class, but actually, if your appliance can teach you something new, you might not use that appliance all the time. You might cook in lots of different ways. But I think in terms of an educational tool, it's incredibly useful.
I mean, I think one thing that we've observed for sure is that cooking's expensive. And there's a lot on the line, right? You're going to start making a meal at 5 o'clock, and your family wants to eat at 6, and you spent $45 on those ingredients. And if things go sideways, you've got 2 problems. You've got a bunch of hungry people that are angry, and you wasted $45, and now you got to go buy dinner on top of that. And so we've looked at a bunch of our users have cooked more than 60 different recipes over the course of the last 9 months. And I think that only happens if you give them a way that they can be successful time after time trying new things. And so that's really important to us, is success breeds variety, essentially, in this world. And it's a powerful force if you can harness that.
I think discovery comes with risk. Of course, that's in its very nature, but that's the whole point of this technological side to it, is can we remove the risk of discovery and let people be completely free and not have to worry about the downsides and the high stakes of cooking, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, food is pretty much the most personal, one of the most personal things that there is, and yet so often food recommendations are kind of impersonal. So yeah, personalization seems to be such a easy place to fit in. What's going to happen to recipe writers in the future? How is their job going to have to change?
Actually, it's one of there's a few words that have been bandied around today, and it's quite interesting, and I think it's probably because of the American sort of side of things, but everyone uses the word chef. We don't do that in the UK. We have chefs, obviously. They work in restaurants. At Good Food, we cook. We are home cooks. Our test kitchen is full of home cooking appliances. It is not full of kitchen appliances that you find in restaurants. And I think there's a sort of difference, actually, if you are serving up to the UK market. It's something to remember that if you use the word chef, it immediately makes people think it's difficult. It's slightly more tricky, and you need some skills. So it's one of the things that I would actually advise everyone to do, is actually look at that wording, because if you instead say cook, anyone can cook, a child can cook. So I think, depending where your recipe writer is coming from, in order to serve up recipes for different platforms, so what we do is we have the base recipe, which is written in quite a conversational style. So it's not shouted instruction, because they just don't read very well in print, and quite often our recipes go up in print first. When you translate that recipe into something for the web, it's got to fit a format, it needs to be slightly more instructional looking, you might take some of the conversational words out, and then again, when it has to change, if it's, if it's a voice, is going to read it, again, it's the difference between the Alexa model and the Google model. Do you want the more conversational style back, or do you want the instructions? I think recipe writers are basically going to have to be able to do all sorts of different things. And again, there was the Twitter recipe, which had a sort of brief moment of very few words indeed. And now, you can't live link on Instagram, so you can't put your recipe link in there. So people have started writing the recipes underneath, and it's the same with video content. Fewer people were watching video, and actually, if you add recipe to that, again, the video watches go up. You've got to be incredibly versatile as a recipe writer now, I think.
I think you have to embrace the community. I mean, that's the key, right? You can't operate and just say, this is the recipe and this is how I'm going to do it, and I'm just going to publish it. And of course, when you do things like that anyway, it's going to get commented on, and people are going to share their own stories and experiences based upon that. I think once you really embrace the community and try to have that conversation with them and say to them, I'm open to this and I'm open to hearing your thoughts and ideas and how this could be relevant for different people, then I think that's really interesting. But also, most recipe platforms or any kind of recipe sites, they generally have a system whereby upvoting, rating, or reviews are given, and that leads to problems in itself. I think the way across all of our choices in society are driven by ratings and reviews and recommendations, but of course, those are flawed in many ways because ratings and reviews are never contextualized. So if someone rates a recipe 5 stars, but it's got, an ingredient that I really don't like the taste of, and I didn't notice that, or something like that, then that 5 stars has no meaning to me at all, and I'm going to have a bad experience. So I think when you're embracing the community, I think it's really important that contextualization is really part of that journey as well, and that needs a platform shift as well.
I mean, I think we all need to take a long, hard look at ourselves here, too. Like, obviously you're here, you're at least somewhat interested in food, right? I'm less familiar with the international trends. Cooking in the US is on decline. It is. It's just the reality. People are scared of cooking. They don't know how to cook. They don't know how to get good results. And so, clearly, to some extent, what we have today is failing them, right? Or they would be doing it and enjoying it more. And so, I think the question is what's missing? We do a lot of user testing on our recipes. Every time we create a recipe, we have a set of people that come in, they cook it on video. The chefs are forced to sit there and watch these people cook it on video. And honestly, if you want to see something fun, watching the chefs watch someone on video cook something is one of my favorite things. Tearing their hair out, do you not know how to dice an onion, right? And it turns out people don't know how to dice an onion. And so the question is how have we arrived at this situation where people don't have the confidence, they don't get the results, and they're choosing not to do it, right? For us, that means more prescriptive instructions, more video content, more images to show them how to do things, and a lot of testing and revising so that you're using the right words that actually mean something to a home cook, right? Instead of the common recipe or cookbook language that mostly means nothing to your average home cook.
Do you think it's also the fact that, of course, the macro trend is that we've become a society of super convenience and uber laziness and binge watching on Netflix and delivery, et cetera, and ultimately that's kind of a driving force behind perhaps the ability and confidence and willingness to cook, and then we develop these technologies that help people go through these journeys in a more convenient way. But then, are we diluting cooking down a little bit beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I would say maybe if you give me the following choice. You can eat something crappy that took you a long time to make and that you put a lot of effort into, or you can eat something crappy that was fast, right? Okay, well, I'll take crappy and fast, right? That seems like a good trade-off. I think what I'd rather say is okay, it might take a little longer, but it's actually really going to be good when it's done. Or you can have something crappy and fast. Our company clearly comes down on that it's going to take a little bit more time, but at the end you're going to have something that you're actually proud of that you will feel good about eating. And so for me, that's how I guess I evaluate it.
50 years ago, if you wanted to eat, you had to cook. I mean, you don't have to cook anymore. I think that's got a lot to do with people not cooking. They have a choice. And the timing thing is hilarious. We get a lot of feedback of, we only want 20-minute recipes and 30 minutes is too long. And actually, when we test people and how long they take, they're quite happy taking 40 minutes. they just think they've only got 20 minutes. So I think, quite a lot of it is what the consumer thinks, what they actually want to do, and also they've always got that choice.
I want to be sure to open it up to the audience for questions because I've spoken with enough of you over the break that I know that there are some questions out there. So, yes. All right, I'm gonna, oh man, he's in the back. I'm gonna throw this little box. I might need some help by someone in the middle. Okay, ready? Here we go. All right, halfway there.
Great. Nice device, by the way. I've never seen that. So my name is Malte. I'm a freelancer, nutritional scientist, and writer. And what I want to say is that if you look at Amazon for the top 10 in healthy nutrition books, for example, actually you wouldn't find any book about healthy nutrition. You only find cooking books. And that's something I miss in the discussion because that's an incentive for many people at home who are currently not cooking but would like to cook maybe. And at the same time, many people have to go to out-of-home restaurants. They eat during work time, hours, or something like that. So there I see clearly a B2B business case, like Kishan has said, with healthy recipes, stuff like this. But for the private home market, there's a huge incentive to have a healthy diet. And their recipes might be one of the most important stuff to have calculations about energy density, salt, sugar, fat. So that's just more a statement, but I think that's missing.
It's funny, actually, I was going to say something about healthy, but I haven't had a chance. One of the things that's really tricky with healthy recipes is actually when you look at portion size in a picture, it's incredibly small. And it's one of the things that we always have problems with. We have quite a big sort of healthy section on the website, and we have a program that you can sign up to, and it's incredibly stringent. It's not a diet as such. You choose what you want to eat, but actually it's one of the things that to publish healthy recipes with visuals as well, it's quite a tough proposition because what you're showing people on a plate is far less than they want to eat. And I think it's one of the most interesting conversations that's going to come up about serving healthy recipes.
Well, in cooking something that's healthy and eating healthy are two totally different things. So I'll tell you, if you want your food to taste better at home, like for 99% of you, add more salt, add more butter. Like it's gonna taste better. And that's why restaurant food tastes way better than the stuff you cook at home. It's those two ingredients. Now, if having a little more fat in there means you eat half as much of a serving, that might actually be a pretty reasonable trade-off, even though you put more fat into the particular dish. Rather than, there was no fat, and so I just ate like a whole plate full of carbs because it didn't fill me up in any way. And so I think there's an interesting tension between cooking healthy and eating healthy, and they're not always cut and dry.
Yeah. I think from that perspective, the one thing I'd like to add from the health perspective is how often we talk about health, and as JJ said, it's like ultimately nobody's habits are going to change, and our ability and willingness to want to be healthy and be more healthy in reality comes down to the fact that there is this satisfaction that has to happen, whether it be from the size or the actual taste. And so we have to be able to unearth, using food science, ways to drive the same level of satisfaction that comes from that taste from the healthy recipe. And because there's the psychological factor always playing a role in terms of, I know I'm eating something healthy because I'm on a diet or I'm trying to be more healthy. Therefore, there's already a down weightage in my mind about what I'm about to eat. But if I can bring that back up, if we can use science and technology to bring that back up and say that, wow, the satisfaction that came from that, then I think more people would be healthy and actually execute on the, instead of all these failed promises that happen in January.
Yeah, the nutrition element is huge and goes, you can't even talk about recipes without talking about nutrition. So thank you for your question. It's a great question. Any other questions? Yes.
I thought the comment about risk was very interesting, and people's approach to risk when taking on recipes. The other thing I was wondering about was a changing pattern of home activities and home makeups. So first of all, a question, is it true that the way that people learn, I suppose, societally, how to cook has changed? So 50 years ago, you spent longer with your parents, perhaps in those homes, learning how to cook because you cooked more frequently. And that leads me to a question. Since people are not taking the risk because they haven't been guided as much maybe through cooking and learning how to cook and learning what happens when you taste it halfway through and it's a bit too sweet, so you add something to make it less sweet or so on. Is it feasible to imagine, and I'm also inspired a little bit by what Deb was saying here, there's recipes and the way it should work out, and we can talk about making that more and more precise with more and more pictures and more details. There's modifications that the community says work if you do it correctly. If you make exactly those modifications, it'll also turn out nice. But the reality for most people is, irrespective of which route we're following, it goes wrong halfway through. So my question I'm leading to is whether it's feasible to imagine real-time support, real-time online, I'm at step 6, it tastes awful, any way to save this 40 euros worth and 20 minutes worth of investment. Is such a real-time support for recipe correction technically feasible in a cooking environment?
As someone who has spent Christmas Day on Twitter doing just that, who knows? It's sort of, I don't know whether technology is up to that, but yeah, they make me do it sometimes.
I mean, it's certainly conceivably possible, right? Like, I mean, if you know what you're supposed to be doing and there's other people that have done it, you could imagine, here are everyone else's photos from that step that have been where you are. Does it look the same? Does it look different? Like, why would that be? I mean, we certainly haven't done it yet, but it technically seems feasible.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, why not just take it to the end game and say, well, let install a computer vision device and let them watch you, essentially. Let the system, the machine intelligence, let it understand what you're doing and alert you before you make the mistake, as opposed to when you've already made the mistake and the meal's already ruined, essentially. So I think that's where there's an opportunity, certainly from a technology perspective. I'm not sure how many people want to sit there on Twitter on Christmas Day and actually do these kinds of things, but only the hardcore foodies. But yeah, I think the opportunity is definitely there. Technology's right there, right now, where you could, subject to privacy, I guess, but like having some sort of device that's monitoring what you're doing and able to assist you in real time.
I mean, I think like it's really interesting to consider error in two ways. There's what I would call recoverable error in a recipe, and there's unrecoverable error, okay? If you add too much salt to something, you're generally kind of in trouble, right? Like, I mean, you can start diluting it down, but now you're diluting the flavors instead of just the salt. It's a disaster. And this has actually been a really interesting tension at our company between the chefs that build the recipes and the software engineers. So salt is this crazy thing. If you're a pro chef in the US, you use something called Diamond Crystal Kosher salt. It weighs about 45 grams per quarter cup. So if you measure by volume, quarter cup, 45 grams. If you're a home cook, you probably use Morton's salt. Well, Morton's salt weighs 75 grams per quarter cup because of the difference in grain size. And so if we would have let the chefs do what they wanted to do and use their Diamond Crystal measurements, everyone's food would have been oversalted, right? And so instead, undersalting is a recoverable error, right? You can always add more salt. And so as you're designing recipes, it's really interesting to think about how do you write a recipe in a way that any error that might creep into it becomes a recoverable error instead of an unrecoverable error. And that's how we try to think about things so that you can sort of fix things down the road if stuff gets off track.
Yeah, salt to taste is in a lot of recipes, and I think that's why. Also, technology can help humans with recipes, but when it comes right down to it, we as the human have to taste as we cook to even know if we want to dial the call-in help for this doesn't taste great right now. I think we have time for one more question. If there's another question. There's another hand up before. Yeah, go for it.
I'm behind you.
Hello. I was wondering how we can encourage people to learn the skills that come with experience. So you can follow a recipe slavishly, but because of all the variables, say how your oven works, the temperature of your ingredients that you start with. So, and so how can we teach those skills? Because a recipe can be as precise as you like, but there are loads of variables that come into it. So when my teenage daughter cooks cupcakes, she'll put the timer on, and I have an oven that you can't smell when something is burning, and she doesn't understand that maybe she needs to check. So how do we get those kind of things that just come with experience?
Well, the most important words in a recipe are or until. It should be in every recipe. Because, yeah, you're right. So it's 40 minutes or until. What do you look for that tells you that thing is cooked? Yeah, I'm in the same way that, if your oven doesn't give off any degree of indication that you're burning things, and mine certainly doesn't. I also wish I had a saucepan that would shout, "Hey, pay attention," every now and then, because I've walked away from the caramel for the 8th time.
I mean, because disagreement is fun. I would hope if we go, I'll do this after this session. I would hope that if I go search the phrase for or until in our recipes, it's not there, ideally. Like, it shouldn't be there. I think, like, the way you teach people, this sort of goes to the question before, is like, I think people are learning to cook differently now. I think there's like a lost generation, actually, and it's kind of my generation. My mom went to work, both my parents worked, right? We didn't, cook at home a whole lot. And so I think a generation of people didn't know how to cook, and now what do, right? They have kids, they don't know how to cook. Like, the game is lost, right? The thing that we've seen that's crazy is that the number of young kids that are cooking using apps is huge. And I guess it shouldn't have been surprising, right? Like, kids love tablets, kids love making things, and so if you give a tablet that can help them make a thing, they start doing it. And so I think there's actually a possibility of rekindling some amount of desire and education and zeal for cooking using apps in the younger generation.
I think this all goes to show that, yes, the recipe has changed, and it is continuing to change. The evolution continues. Thank you so much to our panelists, JJ and Kishan and Lulu.